adenosine diphosphate, etc. Now we're going to move on to anaerobic respiration. What did we say anaerobic respiration was again?
When the respiration doesn't need oxygen.
Doesn't need oxygen. All right. Now, think about what happens when you run. You breathe heavily and your heart beats faster. Both of these things help to get more oxygen to your cells. Sometimes this is not enough and oxygen cannot reach your cells fast enough to supply their needs. That's the thing. That's when you start to respire aerobically. When you are doing, let's say, a long distance race, right? You are trying to find as much oxygen molecule as possible to repair your muscles because your muscles is becoming fatigued now. They are becoming tired, right? They are using up a lot of oxygen. So the faster you go or the longer distance you go, the more oxygen is being used up. Therefore, the more oxygen you have to produce to supply to those tissues and cells. Making sense? Right? No. In this case, they are saying sometimes this is not enough and oxygen cannot reach your cells as fast, cells fast enough to supply their needs. What they are basically saying is that the speed or the distance to which you are going, sometimes the oxygen can't keep up. Your production level is less than your I would say what you are using up. So let's say you are basically doing, use the example of a long distance race, you're running a lap, right? Or let's say you have about 50 kilometers to drive. But when you look at your gas level is about 40, right? It doesn't have enough fuel to fuel that section for you to complete the 50 kilometers, right? What is going to happen? There should be some substitute. What if the battery alone can carry to it? What if you can jumpstart the car and the car to the next 10 kilometers or so forth, right? There's some alternative. In this alternative, you are now going to respire anaerobically. That is the lack of oxygen. Now, when you're respiring anaerobically, your products are going to be different. When you respire aerobically, what was your products? What was the products?
Water, carbon dioxide, and energy.
Right. In this case, you're going to produce something different. All right. And once you don't have oxygen, that means you're going to have a lot of buildup of carbon dioxide. Is carbon dioxide good in the body or bad?
Bad.
Bad, right? It's not good. So therefore, it's toxic. All right. No, let's move on. When cells do not get enough oxygen to meet their needs, they can switch from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration to release energy without using oxygen. So look at it now. When you have energy or you have food, right? You want to break down that food into energy so you can move faster and faster and faster, right? Now, the first equation, we had glucose plus oxygen. Therefore, we had oxygen in our equation, right? And we know that we use oxygen in aerobic respiration. So if you're doing something simple, you're going to use oxygen. Those muscles and those tissues are going to use oxygen. And guess what? You can repeat that oxygen that your muscle use quick, very quick. But when you are doing too much work and you can't repeat them as quick as possible as how you are doing that work, you start to respire now anaerobically. Now you can therefore release energy without using oxygen, right? We can represent this process using the general formula glucose. Remember, the first one was what? Glucose plus oxygen. Now, we don't need oxygen in anaerobic respiration. None at all. So you start to respire aerobically first. And when the muscles realize now, okay, your oxygen deficit can't keep up. The level of production of oxygen can't keep up to how we are use of oxygen. So they start to respire anaerobically now. All right? With lacking oxygen. So therefore, if we look at this equation, we will not have oxygen in the equation. So we have glucose goes to form lactic acid plus energy. For the first one, we had carbon dioxide plus water. Not in this case. Lactic acid is the product of anaerobic respiration. You need to know that in your head. Lactic acid is the product of anaerobic respiration. Carbon dioxide plus water is the end product of aerobic respiration. You need to know this. Why? Because it's on many, if not all, past papers. And this is on paper two questions. You are required to write the formula for aerobic respiration and the formula for anaerobic respiration. You're also going to be required to distinguish between both and why one use oxygen, one don't. What is lactic acid? How is it produced? And is it good for the body? Those are questions they are going to ask in the exam. So you need to know them. Let's answer them now. Why we don't need oxygen in anaerobic respiration? Because your body is not developing or not producing the amount of oxygen that the muscles are using up. They can't follow up. All right. That's why we don't need the oxygen there. So they start to respire anaerobically. Next thing, what is lactic acid? Lactic acid is a substance that is produced by the muscles when you don't need oxygen. Where does it comes from? As I said before, it comes from the muscles and fatigue muscles, that is, right? Muscles that are tired. Um, is it good for the body? Is it toxic? Yes, it is toxic. All right. So therefore, when you start now to produce lactic acid, you know what happens? Sometimes persons say, oh, I have stitches. When you're running too long, and you feel a little sharp pain in the tummy, you have stitches. Or you are doing something, right? And you realize, let's say you're doing a long race or something like that. You realize that your feet can't go any further. They are just running, but you don't have control over it any at all, right? That's basically lactic acid being produced in your muscles, right? When those are produced, energy is also being released. But guess what? You see, once there's too much lactic acid started to produce, you have to stop. It's an automatic response that we call a involuntary response. All right. Now, what happened is that this will stimulate a section in your brain, right? That is called a brain stem that is in charge of involuntary action, and you definitely have to stop. You don't have no control over any at all. You know why? Too much lactic acid is too toxic, and the liver can't break down too much lactic acid. All right. Now, once lactic acid is being built up in your body, once you stop the race, what will happen now is that you owe your muscles. You see, all the oxygen that the muscles was using up, you owe them because they weren't getting any oxygen any at all, but still going on. So you now owe them those oxygen molecules. So guess what? When you stop, right, you are now breaking down this lactic acid. It becomes oxidized. Oxidation is what? Loss of electrons. So you are breaking down this lactic acid now back into carbon dioxide and water. And meanwhile breaking down this lactic acid into carbon dioxide and water, you are trying to respire now aerobically. And when you respire aerobically, you produce oxygen. Remember, I know aerobic respiration, glucose plus oxygen. So when you are respiring now aerobically, oxygen is in the midst. And that we call oxygen deficit. Oxygen depth is when you hold the muscles and you are paying them back. Oxygen deficit now is when you are producing it to give them back. Everybody understand? When you're in debt with money, same thing. Oxygen depth. You're in depth of oxygen, your muscles. When you're paying back, deficit, that we call deficit. All right. And that is oxygen deficit. Now, let's continue to read. Anaerobic respiration takes place in the cytoplasm of cells and it does not involve the production of ATP. The reactions in anaerobic respiration release only a fraction, about 0.8 kilojoules of glucose. In the first one, the reason why we produce a lot of energy is because we had oxygen. What was the approximate energy that we produced for aerobic respiration again? What was it? Anybody remember? Anybody remember the
No, sir.
approximate? Yes?
No.
Okay. I believe it was 16, but let's check. Right. So here it is. So the energy, approximately 16 kilojoules of glucose is produced during aerobic respiration. But anaerobic respiration now, it's approximately 0.8 kilojoules. So you're realizing that this is less, right? That's why you have to stop. It's decreasing, going down, and enables you to stop the race. All right. Now, this is about 0.8 kilojoules of grams of glucose of the energy that is released during aerobic respiration. This is because the glucose molecules are not broken down completely in the process. All right. Now, during this process, lactic acid is produced as a waste product. We don't call lactic acid a product of anaerobic respiration. We call it a waste product. There's a difference, right? The waste products, all right, in the process of photosynthesis, right? What's the formula?
Sir, could you please repeat the question?
What is the formula for photosynthesis?
Carbon dioxide plus water with the help of sunlight creates glucose and oxygen.
Okay, what is the waste product in photosynthesis reaction?
Oxygen.
Oxygen only. That's
Yes,
the
sir.
waste product.
Yes,
What is
sir.
that, right?
Yes, sir.
Good. Now, during this process, lactic acid produced lactic acid is produced as a waste product. Sorry, right? So that means we don't need that product any at all. We don't need it because oxygen is been in the process of photosynthesis, right? Oxygen is being released as a waste product through the stomata. It gone. We don't need it. And you take that waste product. So what you breathe in is oxygen, which is the waste product of photosynthesis. All right. No, this build up in muscles and causes them to ache. All right. It's when they say something like, "Oh, I have muscle contraction." Right? You're running and you feel like you have muscle contraction. These are building up of lactic acid. Lactic acid doesn't only build up because you are respiring anaerobically. If you are unhealthy, you get a lot of muscle contraction. So let's say you're sleeping in the night, right? I saw a video the other day when um somebody is just waking up out of bed and they are just shaking and stretching, right? And can't move. Those are lactic acid produced because why? You stay one place too long in the bed. You didn't move up and down. And stretching in the morning is good for you, all right? Because your muscles tend to tense up in the mornings, all right? So when you stretch, you hear some bones start to creak and everything like that, right? That is good for you, all right? So try to stretch every morning. All right, next thing. At this point, you feel fatigue. Fatigue is the same thing as tired. Muscles become fatigued as a result of lactic acid buildup. Therefore, once you become fatigued, lactic acid is being produced. Again, lactic acid is toxic. Lactic acid is not good. As we continue to breathe, more oxygen reaches the cells and aerobic respiration can take place again. So you are running the race, right? And you become fatigued and you're tired and you have to stop. Say, no, I have to stop. I have to start walking now. We can't go no more further. Right? When you are walking now, you are basically building up oxygen. So you are basically going back to aerobic respiration. Going in back to aerobic respiration, you are producing oxygen from the energy that you have. And this is now going back to the muscles to pay back the muscles whatever they were doing before. All right? You have to pay them back. No, the oxygen breaks down the lactic acid in our muscles and converts it to carbon dioxide and water, producing ATP in the process. So now, lactic acid is toxic. But look at it now. The oxygen now that is produced, right? That you are producing. So look at it. When you become fatigued, right? You start to respire aerobically now. Respiring aerobically is basically gaining oxygen from the air. When you are gaining oxygen from the air, this oxygen molecule, which is the O2 molecule, it's now become oxidized and break down that lactic acid into carbon dioxide and water. As I said before, oxidation is loss of electrons, all right? Oil, rig. Oxidation is lost, reduction is gain. So when this become oxidized, what happens is that these lactic acid molecules start to lose electrons and become weak. And once they start to become weak, the end product is going to be carbon dioxide and water, which originally was the product of aerobic respiration. So once you start produce carbon dioxide and water, that means you start to go back to aerobic respiration now. All right. Now the oxygen breaks down the lactic acid into the muscles and convert them to carbon dioxide and water, producing ATP in the process. And once these ATP start produced, we know that the amount of ATP produced in aerobic respiration is a value of about 38. All right. Now, in anaerobic respiration, sometimes they produce a value of about 2 ATP in the process. All right. Now, anaerobic respiration in muscles can take place only for a few minutes since lactic acid is what? Toxic. After muscles have respired anaerobically for a few minutes, the lactic acids they have built up stops them from working. During the recovery period, which means when you are resting now, the rush of oxygen to the muscles promotes aerobic respiration. Some lactic acid is being oxidized and the rest is converted into glucose. In this way, oxygen debt is repaid. When you owe somebody, you are in debt. When you pay them back, it's a process of repaying. So you have repaid them. All right. Now look at the diagram over to the left hand side now. Now we have glucose at the top there. Now this 2 ATP is a production of anaerobic respiration. Now you have the cytoplasm there, right? Anaerobic respiration takes place in the cytoplasm, not the mitochondria. All right. Now the mitochondria with oxygen is where aerobic respiration takes place, producing 36 moles of ATP. And once this is produced, once this lactic acid is being converted back into glucose, right? Back into carbon dioxide and water, sorry. This 2 ATP molecule added to this 36 molecule is going to give us a value of 38. That's why overall, aerobic respiration produces 38 moles of ATP. Everybody see that? Nice. Now, in this case, right, water, and carbon dioxide is being produced. But in here, so now, lactic acid is being produced. But what happened to the lactic acid? When you use oxygen now to oxidize this lactic acid, now it becomes water and carbon dioxide, which is the same thing over here. So, right? So lactic acid, that process of anaerobic respiration can only take place for a few minutes. Why? It is very toxic to the body. Not good. Everybody understanding so far, right?
No, yes, sir.
You're not understanding?
Sir, let me just be honest. You see, from the term start, I'm not understanding anything.
What are you not understanding?
Sir, I'm just not understanding this particular topic. Like this, like anaerobic respiration. Like I just think it's too many words I'm looking at.
And it's very complex.
Yeah, it's complex.
You don't you don't understand this one, I said?
Yes, sir, like I understood everything before in biology. Like right now, I'm just lost though.
You're lost in this one?
In this certain topic, yeah, like ever since the beginning of class. That's it.
All right. No problem. We're going to start right back over. Ready? Pay attention, everybody. Paying attention?
Yes, sir.
Nice. Let's begin. Before we go to this one, right? You understand everything from last class? Aerobic respiration?
Yes, sir. I do. I'm not sure about the rest of the
Priyanka, why are you looking at the side and looking in the
Sir, you know, it's okay, sir. It's fine. This is not my subject. Let's just move on.
You're not going to do biology in fifth form.
I have to, but I don't like it. That's all.
You don't like it?
Sir, you should feel good. You know, your subject is the only science subject I like.
That's nice. Very good.
Yes, sir.
The only one. I hate chemistry and physics, sir. Like, just can't deal with it.
I prefer physics to bio, but okay.
All right. So look at it now, right? Let's start off with the process of respiration overall first. All right. How many time do we have left? A good amount of time. All right. Let's start off with respiration on a whole. Can somebody please remind me what is respiration on a whole definition? Just give me a broad definition of respiration.
The release of energy through food, something like that.
Okay. So it's the breaking down of food to produce energy or the release of energy through food. Full stop. That's it. We have covered respiration. Can somebody please tell me or give me a broad definition for aerobic respiration?
It's using large amounts of energy of oxygen to break down digested food.
Good. So basically, the difference between respiration and aerobic respiration is that when we are breaking down these food to produce energy, the molecule that is used to break this down is oxygen. All right? So once you talk about aerobic respiration, right now, as I speak, all of us are respiring aerobically now because you're not moving, we're not running, we're not doing any hard work any at all. All right? So we are respiring now aerobically. All right? Now, in terms of generalizing an equation for respiration, respiration is the flip of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis was carbon dioxide plus water goes to form glucose plus oxygen. If you flip that, glucose plus oxygen goes to form carbon dioxide plus water. The only difference is that energy is being released. So for all the products, energy is being released. That's the only difference. Now, why is there less oxygen in exhaled air than inhaled air? We know that, right? When we inhale oxygen and some amount of carbon dioxide, our tissues and cells in our body use up some of the oxygen, right? But not all of it is being used up, so we exhale back some out, right? Now, the experiment that we talked about was when we used the, but I'm going to show you a video on this one, all right? Now, let's move on. That's basically how we talk about aerobic respiration, right? Now, anaerobic respiration now is when you are not using oxygen any at all. Now, before we reach to anaerobic respiration, right? You have to go through aerobic respiration first. So you have to start to respire aerobically first by using oxygen until you reach the point where, okay, based on the level or the speed at which you are going, the production of oxygen can't keep up with you. You are going too fast, right? But the oxygen level that you are producing, it can't keep up. So you know what I do? You stop, right? Stop completely. And then you're going to a next thing now. It's basically when you're running a race and you're too fast for the competitors. You go to the semi-final, you move on, right? Same thing with this one. You are moving too fast, but the level of oxygen that is being produced, it can't keep up with what you are doing. So the level of oxygen stops completely and your muscles start to move without oxygen. They're not supposed to move without oxygen now, you know, but they start to do that. That process is called anaerobic respiration. This is when your body is moving, your muscles are being contracting and relaxing during a specific work without the use of oxygen, right? Now, when you are doing this, right, your muscles have stored oxygen that it has before in the form of ATP. That is what is being used up. So you are not producing enough oxygen to repair that, you know, right? But they have stored up oxygen somewhere found in the muscles which they are using up, right? Now, after you have completed that race or that work that you have done, right? You have to go back to aerobic respiration now because lactic acid is being produced in anaerobic respiration, and lactic acid is what? Is what?
Toxic.
Toxic. Lactic acid is not good for you. All right? So therefore, once you're producing lactic acid, you can only do that for a few minutes. When your muscle become fatigued, you have to stop doing what you're doing and start to rest. In your resting period, you are producing oxygen. You are taking in back those oxygen. Those oxygen molecules are going back to the muscles that was using or that was working without any oxygen at all. That is what we call oxygen depth, right? When you owe the muscle some oxygen, you owe somebody some money, you are in debt. You owe the muscle some oxygen, so you are in debt. Oxygen deficit is when you pay them back. In the process of pay them back, that's oxygen deficit. When you owe the muscle, oxygen debt. Now remember, you don't have control over this. This is an involuntary action, all right? That means a section of your brain that is called the medulla, or what we call the brainstem. That section is being stimulated and involuntary action is taking place. Yes, when you squint your eye, if you cough, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, you don't have control over them, none at all, right? None at all. So those are being stimulated by the part of your brain that is called the brainstem, right? Now, what happened is that when these molecules of ATP is being produced, which is about 36 molecules of ATP in aerobic respiration, anaerobic respiration is going to now become oxidized, and oxidation is the loss of an electron. So that means once they become oxidized, they produce 2 moles of ATP. Those 2 moles of ATP is going to add to that 36 moles of ATP for the aerobic respiration, and that is going to give you an overall of 38 moles of ATP. That's the amount of moles used in aerobic respiration. That's the amount of ATP used. All right? Now, let's talk about lactic acid a little bit. Let's move on to here. The equation here is glucose goes to form lactic acid plus energy. The original equation for aerobic respiration was glucose plus oxygen. We don't have no oxygen here say any at all because we don't need it, right? No. The first equation was carbon dioxide plus water, which was the product. In this case, lactic acid is the product. Lactic acid is a toxic substance. That means it can't stay in your body too long. So what happens is that when you're running a long distance race and you become tired, you become fatigued, lactic acid is being produced in your muscles. Once this substance is being produced in the muscles, you have to stop the race. You can't move no further. You can't go any longer. Then now, you start to respire aerobically now to produce back all those oxygen that your muscle was using up that you weren't giving the muscles. Everybody seeing that? Right. So therefore, once you use up those oxygen, right, what is going to happen now in your resting period, when you are resting, right, you are now going to respire aerobically now. Respiring aerobically is getting oxygen. Getting this oxygen is going back to the muscle. Going back to the muscle is oxygen deficit, right? You owe the muscle some oxygen, you owe the tissue some oxygen, you owe the cell some oxygen. So you have paid them back now. So that is called oxygen deficit, all right? Now, as we said before, how we go back to aerobic respiration is when you are producing that oxygen molecule. What the oxygen molecule does, tell me what it does to the lactic acid. What the oxygen does to the lactic acid? It's down here, so it's down here, so
Turns into carbon dioxide and water.
it changes it to carbon dioxide and water, right? Therefore, what do you exhale? Don't you exhale carbon dioxide and water vapor? Right. So that's how it is, right? That's exactly what we're talking about here. Now, anaerobic respiration takes place in the cytoplasm of the cell. Aerobic respiration takes place in the mitochondria of the cell. All right? So in this case, originally, water and carbon dioxide is being produced. But in anaerobic respiration, lactic acid is produced first. And then, because the muscles can't have lactic acid in it too long because it's too toxic, when you start to respire aerobically now, oxygen molecule break them down, or what we call oxidize this lactic acid. As I said before, oxidation is the loss of electrons. So it starts to break away this lactic acid down and it produces water and carbon dioxide. This is what you exhale. This is what you respire. Now, once this process is occurring, this is what we call oxygen deficit. You pay them back. When you owe them, oxygen debt. When you pay them, oxygen deficit. I saw this question on a multiple choice paper too. What is the process of paying back the oxygen to the muscles that they have used up, which you weren't supplying to them? Oxygen deficit. The condition in which the muscles are using them and you didn't give them. Oxygen debt. You owe them. Right? That's how it is. Everybody seen that so far?
Yes, sir.
Nice. To move on to these, we're not going to go through those questions as yet, because let me just leave those for last. All right. Now explaining the process and the formula. Now what we're going to talk about now is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration in the form of how yeast use these. All right. Now bacteria, yeast, and root cells of plants can also change from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration if oxygen in short supply. So remember, you only change from aerobic to anaerobic when you don't have enough oxygen to supply the muscles. Yeast cells use anaerobic respiration to convert glucose into ethanol and carbon dioxide. With the release of energy, some ATP is produced. Again, less energy is released in the process than aerobic respiration. Now, you don't necessarily need to pay much attention to this, but it's very important. You want to really pay more attention to the human body and mammals. In yeast, we use yeast in what? We use yeast in bread. But what is one of the major processes that we use yeast in? Nobody know?
Making alcohol.
Alcohol. All right. What is that process called? It's there.
Fermentation.
Fermentation. So therefore, when we use that to produce alcohol, ethanol is an alcohol. You will learn this in chemistry. Anything that ends with al is an alcohol. Anything that ends with anal, is a ethanol, all right, or aldehyde. You will soon learn it, don't worry. Now this produces ethanol plus carbon dioxide, and energy is also being released, right? This series of reaction is called fermentation, and it is used to make alcoholic drinks and also bread. Now, you have seen in this topic that glucose can be used by organism three different ways to produce different amounts of energy and different products. And here we are looking at them now. In aerobic respiration, in mammals, carbon dioxide and water is produced. In aerobic respiration, when we're talking about drinks, soft drink and beverages and so forth, alcoholic beverages, breads, lactic acid, ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy is produced. And in anaerobic respiration, we're talking about mammals, lactic acid and energy is produced. So this is it. So aerobic respiration, in animals, that is, carbon dioxide is produced and water is produced. Anaerobic respiration, in us as well, lactic acid, energy is produced. But anaerobic respiration in yeast, ethanol and carbon dioxide is produced. Remember, energy is always produced. That's why they see they put a little star thing over energy here. So energy is always produced in the process, because what we are doing, we are using food to make energy. You see it? We are using food to make energy. Everything is always about the energy. All right? Now, we're going to look at some comparisons of aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. I'm also going to show you a video. I don't know if we're going to have enough time to do that video today, but definitely today's a Monday. We have biology tomorrow. Definitely during the week or next class. Now, in aerobic respiration, right? Oxygen used or not? Yes, oxygen is used. The products, carbon dioxide and water. The energy release, you don't necessarily need to know that. You just need to know, say, aerobic respiration produces a lot of energy than the other ones them. All right? No, anaerobic respiration in yeast, oxygen is not used. What is produced? Ethanol and carbon dioxide. Anaerobic respiration in muscles. As I talk about anaerobic respiration, it don't matter if I use muscles, whatever it is, oxygen is not used any at all. As I talk about anaerobic respiration, no oxygen. Now in the muscles, lactic acid is produced, and this is about 0.83 kilojoules or grams of glucose. As I said before, you don't need to know the exact amount of kilojoules that is produced for energy. You just need to know that aerobic respiration produces more energy than every other respiration, that is. Everybody see that so far? Everybody clear? All right. Now what they are going to do here, we're going to basically compare how cellular respiration and photosynthesis are linked to each other. All right. Now, as you can see in this diagram here, cellular respiration and photosynthesis in the plants form a cycle. The products of one are the raw materials for the other. We don't know this already. The product of photosynthesis is the raw materials for respiration. The reactants of photosynthesis is the product for respiration. That's how it is. They are vice versa. So we can just flip it, right? Now, during the day, photosynthesis produces more oxygen than the plant needs for aerobic respiration. The surplus oxygen diffuses out of the leaves of the plants and we get it. So they go through the stomata of the plants and we get those oxygen. Now, at night, photosynthesis stops, but plant cells still need oxygen for aerobic respiration. Oxygen from the air diffuses back into the leaves through the stomata. That's how we mentioned that you're not supposed to sleep with live plants in your house any at all. In nights, they use back the oxygen to form aerobic respiration. Everybody seen how it tie in now? Meeting is going to end shortly. Let's join back.
Sir, you know,